Hi everyone, I'm Cameron Woodward, co-founder of WrapPRO, where we're building the next standard for production payroll and accounting. I'm honored to introduce this panel on California's film production crisis. We hear from production teams every day. You're being asked to do more with less, facing greater scrutiny and tighter budgets on your projects than ever before. WrapPRO launched in 2018 as a force multiplier for the production office. We do that with next-gen technology, backed by a concierge service model with the best paymasters in the industry. And we're engineered for rapid innovation. WrapPRO is committed to helping keep production in California. My fellow founder and CEO, Ali Javid, had the honor of speaking at the press conference in February where AB 1138 and SB 630 were introduced. Now, it's my pleasure to turn this over to our esteemed panel on this crucial topic. Thank you for your time.
Hello, I'm Jeremy Fooster with TheWrap. Earlier this month, Film LA released its latest quarterly report on the number of on-location film and television shoots in Los Angeles County, and the data was as grim as Hollywood expected. Production shoot days have fallen 22% year over year, and the total number of shoot days for television productions has collapsed 58% from its all-time high in 2021. As producers and studios turn to other states and countries with more lucrative tax incentives and modern infrastructure, California's local entertainment industry has seen a precipitous decline right when millions of its workers, financially slammed by the pandemic, the 2023 strikes, and most recently, the LA wildfires, are all in dire need of jobs. Creatives and crew members are leaving the state for employment or leaving entertainment entirely for another field of work. And those who remain have formed an all hands on deck campaign to bring production back to the Golden State. That starts with the California Film and TV Jobs Act, which is a pair of bills making its way through the Sacramento legislature that seeks to modernize the state's tax incentive program and to make it more competitive with other production hubs like London and Atlanta. So, what's in this legislation? How much can it help an endangered part of California's economy? And what must be done beyond these bills to stem the tide? Here to discuss all that are five industry leaders who have been involved in the development of the California Film and TV Jobs Act. First, we have Colleen Bell, the director of the California Film Commission. We have Susan Sprung, CEO of the Producers Guild of America. Noel Stemmen, a showrunner who is a key member of Stay in LA, the grassroots industry organization formed after the wildfires to help encourage local production. We have Rebecca Ryan, the Western Executive Director of the Directors Guild of America and President of the Entertainment Union Coalition. And finally, we have California Assembly Member Rick Chavez Zabur, who is one of the co-authors of the Film and TV Jobs Act. Everyone, thank you so much for joining this panel. Really appreciate your time. And Assemblyman, I'd like to start with you. So as we're taping this, these two bills, there's one in the state Senate and one in the Assembly, and they've passed their first committee votes. And by the time this airs, I believe it's expected that it will have passed more committee votes and be on its way to a floor vote. So this is legislation that has been supported by plenty of LA-based legislators, as well as California Governor Gavin Newsom, but also has faced some skepticism from lawmakers amid the budget crunch that California is facing. So, for those who don't know the details, can you give me a little bit of an overview of what's in this bill? And have you been able to persuade legislators who are on the fence on this with all the budget questions going on to give their support?
So first of all, the goal of the bill is to really make California's program competitive with those of other states and international jurisdictions that are really trying to lure our jobs away. And so we're focusing on things like the tax rate itself. The prior tax rate was at 20%, which was focused on really qualified expenditures, resulted in the fact that our effective tax rate was someplace between 12 and 16%, compared with tax rates that were, for example, 30% that applied to most of not all of the spending in Georgia, and even higher tax rate when you look at what's happening in Canada with both provincial and the national tax credits. So the goal, the California program, it increases the tax rate to 35% for qualified expenses, i.e. below the line expenses. That should be roughly equivalent to the 30% tax rate in Georgia. It also maintains what we call an uplift, which is an extra bonus for filming in California but outside the Los Angeles zone. It expands the kinds of productions that will qualify for the tax break, which includes 20-minute television shows, animation, and certain large-scale competition shows. We actually changed um, the the um, um, the soundstage film tax credit program to make that more competitive. And we increase incentives for independent productions in the bill. So overall, there's some other details there, but overall, what we're trying to do is make sure that we're keeping jobs in California. I think the thing that is unique about the California program is that it's a competitive program that is focused on jobs and job ratios, and really everything we've done is really to try to make it more competitive to sort of keep jobs here in the state.
Now, the budgetary process is going to get in full swing in May, and there's still a lot of question marks over that, especially with the Trump tariffs. Is Trump going to pull federal funding from California? How much of is there going to be an impact from the wildfires on income tax? So a lot of factors around this. Uh, Governor Newsom called for a significant raise of the cap for this tax credit program from 330 million to 750 million. Where things stand right now, do you think that that you're still on course to be able to raise it that much?
I'm hopeful, and the governor appears to be committed to maintaining that tax level. But the reality is we're facing a $20 billion deficit, so we have to work hard to make sure that we maintain the support for this tax credit program. I think really everything that the entertainment unions have done, the stakeholders, all the advocacy that's come from Stay in LA, really all the stakeholders have really come together in a really unique way to really help educate why this is so important and why the jobs and the livelihoods of hundreds of thousands of Californians depend on making this program more competitive. But we still have our work to do. We've got to convince legislators in other parts of the state that this is important for the entire state of California, and this is important to the working people of California. When we actually tell the story, we show them the statistics, we help them understand how really the industry here is facing what I've called depression era levels of unemployment. When they understand that, we actually bring people around. We actually had some skeptics in other parts of the state. For example, the chair of the Arts and Entertainment and Tourism Committee, who's from San Diego, had some skepticism. And as he's learned about the program, he's came on board as really a strong supporter of this program in the last couple of weeks. So we still have work to do, and that's one-on-one making the case with every legislator. And really, all the folks that are on the screen today have been a part of that.
I'd like to open this now to the rest of the panel. So there are a lot of things in here that expand the types of productions that are eligible for this tax credit program. And one in particular that the Assemblyman brought up that really stood out to me was the runtime eligibility. Right now, it's that the TV show has to have a 40-minute runtime at least to qualify. And this bill would lower it to 20 minutes. And that would allow a lot of half-hour productions, particularly sitcoms, to be able to qualify. So, any of you can speak on this. Tell us a little bit about the talks that happened behind the scenes as you were all crafting this legislation and settling on like these are the specific changes that you think were necessary to maximize the number of jobs that are going to be brought back to California.
Yeah. So first off, just want to thank Assembly Member Zuber and Senator Ben Allen for their companion bills. We administer the Film and TV Tax Credit Program. So as director through the California Film Commission, and we've done extensive analysis over the years about runaway production, where it's going, why it's going there, etc. And I think Governor Newsom this has never happened before. Putting it in and proposing it in the budget, proposing to increase from 330 to 750 million. That was huge. The governor decided not to include programmatic changes in that straightforward. And the assembly member and senator have picked this up, and I couldn't agree more that we need to improve our competitive tax rate in order to improve our competitiveness overall. There's no question about that. And just in terms of expanding categories, for instance, so when in the inception of this program, it was believed at that time that half-hour shows were just going to stay here anyhow. So they're multicam shows, they're not going anywhere, they would stay. But as everybody knows who's listening and who's on this panel understands, that the landscape has changed significantly, and now you can have a half-hour show that's a single cam, very large budget project, hiring a lot of people. So expanding the categories is important.
I think if I could just say a word about the process itself, which is that the unions that represent 165,000 people in California who do work in this industry made a commitment early on that the focus had to be on retaining and preserving the most jobs. And that requires you to be very, very surgical about the changes you're prepared to make, because all of those changes use up some of the new funding that the governor was gracious enough to add. So those conversations were difficult, and everybody had to give a little to reach an agreement. Those conversations often included outside groups, but at the end of the day, the stakeholders had to make a decision about what was the sweet spot to increase competition enough to bring these productions back or keep them here, but not so much that you reduce the number of jobs that were retained and protected. And I think we've achieved that. I think both sides feel equally satisfied that we got to the place we needed to get to. And I believe the assembly member and the senator agree. And now the question is telling the story and making sure that people throughout the state understand that the worst thing that could happen to the state of California right now is for a signature industry to slip away, putting more people on unemployment, depriving more people of medical insurance, and weakening the tax base. So this is not, we don't view this as a corporate bill. This is a bill about working people, and it's a bill about keeping the state of California strong and vibrant.
And the thing I want to add is that Rebecca, who's way too modest, listened to every single person that was invested in figuring out how to keep production in California and bring jobs. And obviously, it's an incredibly complicated process because there are so many different stakeholders. And what is unbelievably impressive is how hard people worked together to come up with something that helps as many people as possible.
Now, Noelle, I'd like to talk with you a bit about your work with the Stay in LA campaign, because I've been seeing lawn signs all over the city with the Stay in LA campaign. And I, I'm sure that at the events you've had, the meetings that you've had with industry workers, that there have been all sorts of stories with people who have just been, they've had their financial reserves burned through because of the strike. And then there was this survive till 25, and then 2025 comes, and then here comes these fires, and there's been hundreds of people in the entertainment industry among the thousands who have lost their homes, had their lives ended by all of this. I know that there's with all this production exodus, I'm sure people will think about the crew members, people who are on set, who are losing jobs, but it also goes way beyond that. There's just so many industries that are affected by this exodus. I was wondering if you could speak to that. If you've spoken with workers, whether it's in post-production or in companies that support sets like vendors, props, caterers, people who've spoken to you or at Stay in LA organizing meetings about how they've struggled.
Yeah. How long do you have? I could go on for forever on this. Just to start to give context, as you said, we formed during the fire just to basically because in the wake of all these things in a row that hit the industry so hard and so many people were suffering, we thought it was a really important time to raise the alarm on all of this and to emphasize the need for having a tax incentive. So we created a petition in late January that asked for the incentive to be uncapped. And then we also asked for studios to commit to 10% more film production in Los Angeles over the next 3 years as part of an emergency incentive for the fire, but also as a general need in the city at this point and the state. And we had over 20,000 signatures within 3 weeks. So just to give you a sense of how quickly people responded to this. And then we also had a letter campaign last week to help um, get word to the members of the committee that were basically working with the Assembly and the Senate to get the bill out of committee. We launched a letter petition for that last week, and we got 15,000 signatures within 4 days. So a lot of people are hurting and need to get help quickly. But yeah, we've heard from all kinds of film workers. Obviously, we've also heard from vendors, small businesses, from restaurants that are closing because the post house down the street from them doesn't get the foot traffic anymore because the post house only has people there once a week. And so those restaurants are closing. We had someone in an architecture firm who had to let go of half of their staff because they used to supplement their salaried workers by renting out the space sometimes for film work, and they haven't been able to do that for the past few years. So now they're down to I think 17 employees from 34, something along those lines. So it's reaching across all small businesses, and it makes sense because when people are not working in film, which is our one of our core industries, people don't have money to spend throughout the rest of the city. So we're losing out on all of that tax income, and it's a huge domino effect. And just in terms of film workers, I just want to add that we have had a devastating number of testimonials come in about people who have lost their health insurance across all the unions over the past year because they haven't worked in the past year or 2 years. A lot of people who are scared they can't pay their rent or their mortgage, who are having to move. And if I may, I'd like to take a quick minute and read a couple of the testimonials and give voice to a few of the people that we've heard from that have been particularly devastating. Um, we are a boutique post production sound house. Seeing businesses leave the state and country in search of the cheapest option and at such an alarming rate has been really tragic. We typically employ 40 plus people at any given time, and right now we have a staff of less than 10. It's heartbreaking. These are human beings we have had to lay off. This is from a first assistant director. For the past 3 years, I've had no insurance due to all the work leaving LA. It's heartbreaking to see so many leaving because they can't pay their mortgage or feed their children after so many years that they've dedicated to this industry. This is from a cinematographer. When I first moved to Hollywood 15 years ago, I would see production trucks parked in the street every day. Now, if I'm lucky enough to even land a job, there's a good chance I'll need to leave the state or even the country, which means leaving my family and having to pay for healthcare. This is not sustainable. This is from a showrunner. My last show shot in LA and provided almost 1,000 jobs for 2 years. My current pilot is shooting in Atlanta and will stay there if we can't get a tax credit to stay in LA. And finally, I am a single mother who has been working in post production for over 25 years on one of the three largest scoring stages left in Hollywood. With so much production leaving not just the country, but California alone, the scoring stages are dark more often. They're averaging only one session a month. I unfortunately had to sell my family home and am now living in a trailer on my parents' driveway in the San Fernando Valley. So multiply these times the hundreds of testimonials we've gotten from, again, people who are new to the business, who've been working in it for decades and now have been left behind, and all the small businesses. And it's a devastating picture.
Yeah, and you speak about you're talking about people even scoring, and it for me it calls to mind how in the UK and in some other markets that they offer an extra tax incentive if you do post production things like music scoring. So it's like another way
Yeah.
that the excess affects this. Now,
Yeah, we absolutely. I mean, we did a town hall with post production and scoring about a week ago, and we're absolutely advocating for post production and scoring to be added to the tax incentive because that is a huge number of jobs, and all of these beautiful facilities are sitting there half empty, and these people need to get their livelihood back. I spoke to an Emmy nominated sound editor who worked for 30 years in the business, and she's worked for 3 months out of the last 18. It's not normal, and it's not okay.
Now, this program and the changes to be done to it, there's so many facets to all of this. As I mentioned with that Film LA report, it's just drops almost all across the board. But Rebecca, I wanted to ask you about one specific clause in the legislation. I was wondering if you could help clarify on this, which is the large scale competition shows. So I mentioned that is something that could qualify for the tax credit program, but it excludes, I'm quoting here, traditional reality, game shows, talk shows, or documentary television programming. Now, I wanted to ask you about that because when I saw the phrase large scale competition shows, I think the first thing that came to my mind would be something like American Ninja Warrior, which I think people would also see as like a game show or something like that. So I was wondering if you could clarify what exactly a large scale competition show means under this. Like if you could provide an example of of sort of production that will qualify on this.
Sure, sure. I want to start out by saying that all of the changes to what qualifies are still subject to the rules around the incentive itself. So you still have to have a $1 million an episode budget, and it is still based upon the number of jobs you create. What this does is allow more types of productions to apply, but they don't have individual buckets. And I think if you've ever been on the set of a large scale competition show, and I have, like The Voice or America's Got Talent, they have some of the biggest crews you can imagine. And what it really was an intent to have those kinds of shows be able to compete for the incentive.
Okay. So yeah, I mean I was curious about that because when I look at the Film LA report, the one of the things that I see Film LA regularly talking about is the downturn in reality TV, and we've also seen there have been game shows like The Floor, which have been part of this deal by Fox's alternative programming department. They made a deal to shoot shows like that way out in Ireland and Sweden, countries like that. Um, so when it said excluding traditional reality game shows, talk shows, you mentioned, Rebecca, that there was this sort of give and pull. There was some compromises in there. So what led to that clause about excluding reality game shows? Were there talks about, okay, there are going to be certain types of productions we're going to have to leave off simply because of the volume of applications we're going to expect with this expanded eligibility?
No, I think some of what you're talking about is docu-follow, or I'll use the Real Housewives franchise. Those are not going to ever meet the requirements, the eligibility requirements. And Colleen can certainly speak to this, but competition shows, which might include game shows that have a competition element, it's really a question of what programs are creating the most jobs. What I think game shows, when one thinks about Jeopardy or things like that. So again, I think our intent is to be expansive. I think there continues to be discussions about how we clarify the definition, but the bottom line is really about making space for projects that create the most jobs in all of these various genres. I think that's really the goal.
Colleen, like to expand on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Rebecca's right. I mean, this program is an economic development tool. It's a jobs program. It's highly targeted and focused here in California. It's different than a lot of tax credit programs around the world or nationally. So it's about creating and sustaining jobs, generating economic activity, and because the landscape has changed so much, why wouldn't we want to consider a variety show that is hiring people? We've traditionally been scripted only, and so yet things have changed, and so that's the discussion around expanding the categories, allowing different opportunities, getting people back to work, getting people working, and they are competing for against the other projects. We've had a finite amount of funds to allocate each year. We've been actually a relatively small amount. 330 went quickly, and we've been oversubscribed, and we've had to turn away many projects. So with this proposal and this getting passed, we'll be able to take in a lot more projects. And again, the discussion is ongoing about expanding categories for more opportunities and meeting this moment.
Now, this tax credit program is like the next big step in this campaign. But Susan, we've spoken in the past for previous stories for the wrap about how like this is going to be just one part of the larger process. And I know that you've been in talks with Mayor Karen Bass's office, with Film LA, and a bunch of other stakeholders and local and state legislators. What after this tax credit program, after this all resolved and hopefully passes in full, what do you see is going to be like the next steps? What are other measures that local and state governments and industry stakeholders, what else do you feel needs to be done to encourage more producers to come back to California?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, obviously, the single most important thing is the tax credit, right? That is what will start getting production back. And, what's driving it is budgets. That's the single most important thing for most productions, right? Producers are forced to go wherever they can make their budgets. And certainly our members want to be working in California. There are the best crews in the world here, the greatest sound stages. The weather's perfect. I mean, the conditions are just right. We just have to make it as easy as possible for them to be able to work in California. And so, again, tax credit is the biggest thing, is financial incentives. And then there are some much more local things. And what has been really lovely is everybody's committed to making this work. So when we talk to the mayor's office, they understand that there are pressure points around working with various city agencies and how they can make that work more effectively. I think we need to look at permit fees and see if for some smaller productions, we can lower the cost of permit fees. And then the biggest thing is people need certainty. They need to understand whether they're getting the tax credit, once they receive it, what all their costs and expenses are. So it all needs to be laid out for them as clearly as possible. And then I think the other thing that's really important is to make sure that all of the local agencies around the state are just helping to facilitate and making the process as smooth and easy as possible. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, that's actually a good thing to bring up, because I have heard from producers that a big point of frustration with the tax credit program as it is that when you were approved for it, you've got 6 months to start rolling cameras, and things can happen. Like, you could have an actor suddenly have to walk off the project because of scheduling. There can be all sorts of problems that can fall through, and all of a sudden, the production is not able to move forward in 6 months, and then you risk losing the tax credit. I can open it's open to anybody, some women, if you like to speak on this as well. But what talks have there been to close that up, to make it more flexible so that there isn't that pressure of the clock once they get that tax credit approved?
Well, I mean, we've done some things to make the program more competitive and easier administratively. For example, the amount of time the number of application periods throughout the year will be increasing. So one, you don't have to wait as long to understand whether or not you're getting the tax credit. I know that we're currently, continuing to discuss some of these finer details with all the stakeholders, and those are some of the things that are still on the table. But we have already made changes to the bill that actually increase the number of application periods in the program, and also we've given the film commission more flexibility in moving some money between different buckets, so that if some are oversubscribed and some are under, there's some flexibility in the program in that respect.
Right. And Jeremy, I just want to push back a little bit because what we want is the money to be used, right?
Yes.
That's what creates the actual jobs. So while we try and recognize both with recurring television, where we have a certain amount of time, we hold money for the next season, and with what you're mentioning, which is the amount of time for a production to get up and running. What we don't want is to have money tied up that isn't actually putting people to work. So it's a little bit of a balancing act. Sorry,
It,
Colleen, I didn't mean to jump in.
No, Rebecca, absolutely. You know this program so well. So jump in anytime. But to that point, 180 days to start principal photography. There's a reason for that. We issue credit allocation letters, which are a reserve, and we really want to be able to deploy those. We want to deploy the funds as quickly as we can. I mean, for the most part, obviously you have to go through an audit and all of that, but we have them reserved. So that means that we have to keep them, and we can not allocate a credit allocation to another project if it's being held. We do offer force majeure. We've had, oh my goodness, the last 6 years with COVID, we have a force majeure provision that exists. And then during the wildfires, we had many projects request force majeure, and the dual labor strikes. So we have that mechanism if there is a situation that arises that meets the criteria for force majeure. And we have had projects drop out because of talent schedules. You're right, Jeremy, that does happen. And very often those projects will then reapply.
Now, this question is for Rebecca, but I open it up to the panel if they want to comment as well. So, as Susan said, this is a campaign where everybody seems to be on board: legislators, studios, unions, producers, all stakeholders across the board, which is pretty remarkable given we're just 2 years removed from a very contentious strike that really split the industry. But I want to cite a New York Times report that came out earlier the week that we taped this, about this situation in California, and they looked at budget documents for a production that was in Budapest and one that was in Hungary. And in Budapest, it cost them 59,000 to employ 7 grips, and then it cost 53,000 for just one grip in Los Angeles, because of union minimums, because of all of these costs. Now, I've also spoken to a production executive who said that they had a project, that a big blockbuster that was shot in equal parts in London and Atlanta. And then when it was all done, they compared the costs in the two, and in London, the labor costs were 20 million less than in Atlanta. I bring this up because there have been unions, like after the Hollywood Teamsters reached their deal with the studios last year, they were talking about how they were ready to work with studios to bring productions back to California, but not at the expense of their members. And I wonder, Rebecca, could we get to a point where, after this tax credit program passes, after multiple efforts are made to reduce the costs on various fronts, to make it cheaper to film in California, that there are studios that just say, well, it's still cheaper to pay crews if we shoot in Europe, so we're still going to do it over there. Like, is there a point where labor costs become the big reason why studios say, "Oh, we're not going to shoot," and then that becomes a bigger issue, a bigger point of contention here?
I think that there is a lot more to talk about before we talk about why you would have to take good middle class jobs with decent wages and reduce them to bring production back. I think you have to talk about a federal program, as all these countries that are taking this work overseas have. I think you have to talk about commitment on behalf of the employers. I think we have to decide whether this is an industry and a community that we care about in California. I think we have to talk about how it drives tourism. I think what is always easiest to do is look for somewhere where it's cheaper to pay human beings. And what I'd like to suggest is that we ought to look at everything else before that becomes the focus of our conversation, because I think that is these are not the people in the Entertainment Union Coalition, and the vast majority of people in this industry are not wealthy, high profile people making a lot of money. They're working class people. They're trying to raise their families and keep their health care and have retirement with dignity. And so I sort of reject the starting point being the cost of treating human beings as human beings.
Yeah, let me add to that. I would sort of say, the if we thought that um, that labor costs were something that we should be looking at to keep the industry here in California, I don't think there'd be a single Democratic legislator that would be supporting this program. The purpose of this program is to keep good jobs, well-paid union jobs, uh, and also supporting the small businesses that support the industry and allow them to compete. And I think everyone is looking at this program and understanding that this is our shot to try to bring this industry back and make it work. And that means that we're going to have to, look to producers who want to maintain this program in the future to actually make commitments to the state of California and keep these jobs here, despite the fact that we've got labor costs that are different in other parts of the world.
Yeah, I'd like to add
And
the fact that one of our key points in our initial petition, as I said earlier, was that we asked studios and streamers to commit 10% of their production over the next 3 years to Los Angeles in relation to the fires, but just in general as well. And I know that we all understand that the studios and streamers have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders. That's fine, but I believe they also have an ethical responsibility to their workers, and I believe that they have a civic responsibility to the city and state in which they are headquartered. And so we're really asking for one or more of them to step up and join us and partner with us in showing how much they want to invest in the city and state where we all work and live. And I
and
promise you, I'll love to work with them if they do that. Sorry, go ahead, Susan.
And I have to say, from, obviously we represent individual producers who are not fortunate enough to be in a union. And all of our members have the very strong belief that every single person working on a film or television production is entitled to fair pay and essential benefits. And they should all have health care. By the way, that's a struggle that individual producers, and we've been dealing with for decades. And there really is an obligation. And I think both, everyone you're hearing from here all supports the fact that there is human dignity in work, and that's incredibly important to make sure that everybody is fairly compensated. We are not talking about wealthy people, right? These really are good middle class jobs.
I want to expand this scope to its widest extent and bring it with something that Rebecca mentioned, which is the potential of a federal tax credit. Now, that's probably not something that would be feasible with this current Congress, this current federal government, but a federal tax credit is something that you see in a lot of other countries that are now competitors with Los Angeles and US as a whole, like UK and Canada. It's another layer of federal incentive of economic incentives that these countries offer. And I just wanted to ask all of you, how much do you think in the long term that a federal tax credit is, how important is that to this overall plan of making Los Angeles a more competitive production hub? On paper, it would be something that would also affect, it would help the tri-state, it would help Texas, it would help Louisiana, Georgia, etc. But how much do you see that as something that, like, well, if we could get that, that would really help bring productions back to California?
I'll start out by just saying that my view is you try everything, that you pull every lever, that you ask every stakeholder to do their part. That's what we're talking about here in terms of the producers, and the state is doing their part, and the governor's doing his part. And I believe that, you know, the 100,000 letters that our members sent up to the legislature recently are telling them that they're doing their part. And so we should try everything. We live in a country that is part of a world where this is an industry that other countries seek out and try to lure away. And that means it has tremendous value, and it's an American industry, and we should fight for it the way I wish we'd fought for the automobile industry and, you know, and other industries. And so I don't know the answer to the how or the when, but whether we should, of course we should.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think when we look at the reason why some of the other foreign jurisdictions are more competitive, have more competitive programs, it's because they're layering, you know, either provincial or local programs on with national programs, and the layering of those incentives is what makes us less competitive, at least with the Canadian and some of the other international jurisdictions.
Now let's close on this. So hopefully by midsummer, I believe we should know how this whole process with the tax credit program is going to play out. How the eligibility rules change, how it gets all locked in, and how big the increase of the cap will be. So I just want to ask all of you about what would be the next steps beyond that, whether it is for Noel for the Stay in LA campaign, whether it's for legislators like you, Assemblyman, or for labor producers, or for all of your different organizations and different fronts that you guys are taking on this campaign. What are going to be the next steps beyond tax credit program? And Assemblyman, we'll start with you.
Well, so my focus is getting the tax credit program adopted and in place. And I also just don't want the time to go by without thanking Governor Newsom. You know, we wouldn't be in the place we are about having the potential for a program that is increasing substantially and in which we have the ability to modernize it, had not been for the leadership of Governor Newsom. And so I just want to give him some credit, which we haven't given him at this point yet. And then also for the other people on the screen. I mean, Rebecca has been working with Colleen and others around the clock in the negotiations. This was a very difficult and complicated set of negotiations, and I think it's because all these stakeholders came together and understood how important this is for the workers of California, that we've seen really, no light between the various stakeholders in moving forward with this. So I just wanted to say that before we end. I think the thing that we would do beyond this is that we have to implement this in a way that makes it successful. And so I am a new member of the California Film Commission with joining Senator Allen, who's the other co-author of this. And I think we're going to be working with Colleen and with all the stakeholders and to make sure that this expansion of the program is something that is effective. And I think, really talking to the folks that are making decisions out of this program and helping emphasize how important it is that they do make commitments to California.
I would say with Stay in LA, first of all, also, I want to thank Assemblyman Spur and Senator Allen for the tremendous modernization bills. They're so necessary, and we are so grateful for all your work. And we're here to help get it across the finish line and advocate however we can between now and then. So I'll say that first and foremost. And then also we're, turning our eyes toward City Council and the Mayor's office to do what we can to help advocate with the permitting, streamlining, and anything else needed on the local level.
And I'll just say that if this all goes smoothly and passes, I will willingly and excitedly get to work on writing the regulations. So that's what we will be. We will be very busy at the California Film Commission working on that.
I'm happy to go next. I think that we too want to express our appreciation to the governor and to all of the stakeholders who have been front and center on this. There is only one team on this, and we have sometimes we have disagreements, but the thing we all care about is getting Californians back to work in this industry. I think there's more work to be done on reaching out to people who have the kind of standing in our community to assert where they would prefer to film and to bring to bear some of the other influence on keeping projects in California. And I think that we have to also hold the employers accountable to their part of the bargain. When taxpayer money is being given to them, then that includes an obligation to do something for the taxpayers of California, and that's to keep this industry strong.
Yeah, and I'd say, obviously, I want to echo everybody's sentiments of their thanks. It was incredibly bold what the governor did, and the amount of work. Obviously, Assemblyman, we're incredibly grateful to you for what you've done. And Rebecca, we know you have not slept in months. So, and Colleen, it's all going to be coming and landing at your doorstep. And the fact that so many people are so committed to working together to make this work is incredibly important. And you're right. And then it's going to take a commitment for people to really say, I care about the state and I'm willing to make sacrifices to film here. So
Can
let's
I
just hope we get to that point.
Can I just say one other thing? I'm getting a lot of credit, but I want to make sure that you understand that there's been an army of legislators in California who have been behind this, including Assemblymember Isaac Bryan, Sharon Quirk Silva, Mike Gibson, Chris Ward, Senator Menjivar, Senator Perez, Senator Ben Allen, Senator Stern, Nick Schultz, Senator Assemblymember Coloza, Assemblymember Harabedian. I think the thing that is really unique about this time is that we actually have very, very strong Assemblymember Tina McKinnon as well, and Lola Smallwood Cueva. We have an army of legislators who are joined hand in hand to try to get this over the line, and so I just want to recognize them before the end of the podcast.
Thank you. And I then also have to mention, because I'm getting a lot of credit, that it's the DGA, SAG-AFTRA, the Teamsters, the laborers, the musicians, the IATSE. I hope I didn't forget anyone. If I did, and the Writers Guild as well. So we are also an army, and everybody is doing tremendous work.
Well, thank you all for joining us. This is a marathon, not a sprint, as you guys all said, but we appreciate you just laying out where we stand right now, where everything is going, and best of luck to all of you on this very, very long and very critical campaign. And thank you all out there for joining us. We're going to continue to cover the Film and TV Jobs Act and stay in LA and every single facet of this campaign to bring productions back to California over on WrapPRO. Your continued support would be much appreciated. I'm Jeremy Fooster, and thanks for watching.